Imo PDP declares 7 days fasting and prayer for former Governor Ihedioha's restoration. Former Attorney General of the Federation, Adoke, others face new charges by the federal government in the Malabo oil deal case. On the foreign scene, strong winds, rainstorms paralyze the United Kingdom. Snowstorm expected to follow. And in sport, FIFA to probe CAF's financial dealings.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. The People's Democratic Party in Imo State has turned spiritual in interceding for former state governor Emeka Ihedioha. The party has called for 7 days of fasting and prayer for, quote, restoration of the former governor of the state, end quote. State Party Secretary Izere Emiana said in a statement on Saturday the spiritual journey would begin yesterday. The party has advised state members to wear all black during the fasting and prayer period. They are also to gather at their local houses of worship and LGA party secretariat daily at midday for prayers and to break the fast. The party says members should pray that God would intervene and restore the victory of the former governor as the duly elected governor of Imo State. PDP also advised the people of Imo State to be prayerful while waiting for judgment on the review filed by Ihedioha at the Supreme Court. Ihedioha is asking the Supreme Court to set aside the judgment in mid-January, then nullified his victory in the state's governorship election in March. Former Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice Mohammed Bello Adoke and 6 others probably thought they had seen all the charges that would be preferred against them in the alleged $1 billion fraud in the Malabo oil deal. Well, they are probably feeling dizzy now as the federal government just slapped them with fresh 42-count charges in the case. They include receiving gratifications to facilitate fraudulent oil deal. The government says Adoke negotiated controversial agreements that granted oil prospecting license 245 to Shell and ENI for about $1 billion, paid into accounts controlled by a former petroleum minister, Dan Etete. Adoke was promptly arrested by EFCC officials as he returned to the country from Dubai in December. He had fled there when the Goodluck Jonathan administration ended. EFCC is charging him with alleged abuse of office and money laundering. Others being charged in the case are Raski Ginigwe, A. Abubakar, Malabo Oil and Gas Limited, Nigeria Arjip Exploration Limited, Shell Ultra Deep Limited, and Shell Nigeria Exploration Production Limited. The federal government and Cross River states have been dragged to the ECOWAS Court of Justice in Abuja by the Socioeconomic and Accountability Project, SERAP, in a fundamental right enforcement lawsuit for the continued detention of Agba Jalingo. Jalingo had reported in his publication Cross River Watch that Governor Ben Ayade had allegedly diverted £500 million from state coffers to fund a microfinance bank. SERAP's lawsuit, filed by its lawyer Kolawale Oluwadare, claims the Nigerian and Cross River State government wants to perpetually detain Jalingo to silence him for being critical of the government and for doing his legitimate job as a journalist. SERAP says Jalingo's continued detention and prosecution violates his human rights as guaranteed under the International Covenant on Civil Rights and Political Rights and the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. No trial date has been fixed. While attending to the 33rd African Union Summit in Addis Ababa, President Muhammadu Buhari has called on AU member states on Sunday to look for new strategies that would be helpful in effectively preventing, managing, and resolving conflicts on the continent. He made this call during the high-level meeting of the AU Peace and Security Council on the state of peace and security in Africa. Buhari said new trends and emerging challenges on the continent call for a better approach to resolving conflicts. He called on the AU to strengthen its own mediation tools and develop a new intervention roadmap that would promote national dialogue, reconciliation, and social cohesion. He also said this would help rally all parties towards sustainable peace. President Buhari pledged that Nigeria would continue to serve as a strong contributor to the regional blocs of the peace efforts. A call has gone out for the immediate withdrawal of the hate speech and fake news bills currently awaiting passage at the National Assembly. Participants at the African Independent Television's town hall meeting in Abuja described the two bills as a waste of time and a duplication of existing laws. In a communique at the conclusion of the forum, participants recommend that the two senators sponsors of the bills should immediately begin the process of withdrawing them. They said this would be in the interest of Nigerians. They recommend the senators should focus more on human capital and economic development, job creation, and security. A diversified group of panelists came from the media, government, National Assembly, civil society organization, academia, and other fields. The panelists held that freedom of expression is guaranteed in the Constitution and should not be taken away. They also said the media should not be criminalized. Rather, they said the government should strengthen a healthy media environment that would provide the public with freedom of expression. They agreed that the power to grant radio and television licenses should be taken away from the President and the Minister of Information. They also rejected the jacking up of fines for breaches that relate to hate speech from $500,000 to ₦5 million. The Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU, says federal and state governments should be blamed for rising insecurity in the country. The union says causes of insecurity are not treated by some states before organizing their own internal security networks. ASU Chairman, University of Ibadan, Professor Deji Omwale, made these comments while speaking with journalists in Ibadan over the weekend. He said poor education funding is creating a class of students that are sad memories for society. Professor Omwale said each year the President, his cabinet, and the National Assembly, which he said has no brilliant contributions to the economy, get a big chunk of the budget. He accused them of becoming billionaires overnight as a result of insecurity that plagues the nation. He said more money is spent on acquiring more weapons instead of allocating the lion's share of the budget to poverty alleviation, education, and unemployment. Omwale also spelled out a line of action for the government to work on providing reliable electricity, tackle unemployment, attack poverty, fund education, and keep children in focus on positive development attitudes.
Coming up, African stories. African leaders at the AU summit call for solidarity and peace across the continent. And later, international news. Strong winds, rainstorm paralyze the United Kingdom. Snowstorm expected to follow.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. On the African continent, the 33rd African Union Summit is kicked off at the AU headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The theme for the year is silencing the guns, creating conducive conditions for African development. Gideon Chala reports on the summit at which leaders are calling for continental solidarity and peace.
The opening session of the 33rd African Union Summit has been attended by presidents, prime ministers, and thousands of other participants. This year, the theme is silencing the guns, creating conducive conditions for Africa's development. In his address to the Assembly, the outgoing chair of the Union, also President of Egypt, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, said, "For a lasting peace, regional integration and free movement of people must be a reality soon."
For us, achieving the integration of the continent cannot be efficient if we do not promote the infrastructure of Africa. Linking the different regions of the continent is unavoidable. In order for us to reach regional integration, we need to make sure that free movement of people and of commodities and services be facilitated.
In this opening event of the 2020 African Union Heads of State Summit, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has taken over from his Egyptian counterpart Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. On his maiden speech as chair of the Union, Ramaphosa said deepening cooperation among African states will guarantee continental unity.
We would like to deepen our work together in ensuring that the unity of our continent is solid and is based on the founding principles that our forebears crafted, and advancing the economic growth and sustainable development that our continent needs.
The 33rd African Union Summit is expected to come up with decisions aimed at strengthening the implementation of silencing the guns as soon as possible. The summit wraps on Monday. There have been several side events during the course of the summit here at AU HQ in Addis Ababa. Meetings at the level of heads of state have been held on issues of development under the NEPAD framework. The Peace and Security Council has discussed the Sahel and Libya, and IGAD consulted on the weak South Sudanese peace process.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has commended China's efforts in the fight against coronavirus from the sidelines of the annual African Union Summit in Addis Ababa. Guterres said stigma against China because of the spread of the virus is inappropriate. Here once again is reporter Gideon Chala.
Secretary General Antonio Guterres came to Addis to take part in the ongoing African Union Heads of State Summit. But his press conference was dominated by questions about the coronavirus. Mr. Guterres said what China is doing in its fight against the spread of the virus is remarkable.
It is clear that there is a massive effort that is making by China in order to contain the disease and to avoid its propagation. And I think that that effort is remarkable. The Chinese themselves recognize that the dimension is such that there are some handicaps and some problems that have to be addressed. But we are also at the same time committed through the World Health Organization to support all countries, namely African countries, in order to develop the capacities necessary to contain the disease when it propagates to other countries in the world.
When asked how the spread of the virus should be fought, Secretary General Guterres said precautionary measures are mandatory at all times. But when asked,
do you think stopping flights to China is a solution for mitigating the problem of the virus?
It has not been recommended by the World Health Organization to forbid all flights or to do more radical measures of this nature. I think it's important, as I said, a very strong international cooperation based on solidarity, and it's also important to avoid any form of stigmatization.
When we return, international news. Bad weather batters the UK, more of same in forecast. And later, sport. FIFA to probe CAF's financial dealings.
Welcome back. This is ANN News on the international scene. Since the outbreak of the novel coronavirus in China, scientists from various pharmaceutical companies and other institutions have tried to create a vaccine to stop its spread. Recently, a Shanghai company produced samples of a new vaccine which has just been tested on animals.
Animal testing is a must for any vaccine before it's put to public use. Researchers at Tongji University in Shanghai are using these healthy mice to test some of the latest vaccine samples against the novel coronavirus.
The mouse testing is just a preliminary screening for candidate vaccines. After searching through effective antibodies against a virus, the candidate vaccine will continue onto a toxicology test, which will need larger animals such as monkeys. That will allow us to gauge the safety of the vaccines before applying for clinical testing.
After being injected, the mice will be labeled and taken care of in labs. To guarantee its objectivity, animal tests with the same vaccine samples are also conducted simultaneously at the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention and National Institutes for Food and Drug Control in Beijing.
This kind of mRNA-based vaccine is one of the most advanced and unique technologies to produce a vaccine. It features a shorter preparation time and higher efficiency.
These vaccines are co-designed and developed by China CDC, Tongji University, and a Shanghai Vaccine Company. After getting the antigen from China's CDC in late January, Dr. Li Hangwen and his team have spent 2 weeks producing these multiple types of mRNA vaccine samples.
We have prepared 9 to 12 different antigens for the vaccine samples in animal testing. If the animal test fails, they have to redesign and optimize and improve the formulation of the vaccine.
At present, dozens of domestic and global companies and institutions have invested huge amounts of money and time into creating a vaccine for this novel coronavirus.
Generally, a vaccine needs to pass 3 steps of clinical testing. The period of time may last from several months to several years based on the testing period and test patients.
If the animal tests go well, Dr. Li hopes they can begin further clinical trials as early as April. Although people want a cure that ultimately ends the coronavirus epidemic soon, scientists say effective vaccines must undergo rigorous testing before being put to public use.
Death toll from the coronavirus epidemic has risen to more than 900 as Chinese workers return after an extended Lunar New Year holiday. The government has eased restrictions imposed to counter the coronavirus. World Health Organization says the number of cases outside China could be just the tip of the iceberg. Nearly 100 more fatalities were recorded as of Sunday, the largest number in a single day since the outbreak was detected in December in the Chinese city of Wuhan. WHO's Chief Tedros Ghebreyesus says there had been concerning instances of transmission from people who had not been to China. Reports also show the virus had spread to at least 27 countries and territories. Storm Ciara peppered the United Kingdom over the weekend with heavy rain, flooding, and 93 miles per hour winds that disrupted travel across the country. A man has also been killed after a tree fell on his car. Hundreds of flights were cancelled, while several rail passengers were advised not to travel. Thousands were left without electricity and sporting events were cancelled because of the bad weather. Some homes had to be evacuated as rivers burst their banks. The weather also affected ferry passengers who faced delays and cancellations. Large parts of the UK were covered by an amber warning for a very strong wind, with the MT office advising that large waves in coastal areas and flying debris could cause injuries. More than 600,000 homes were said to have lost power during the storm. A 4-day downpour across Australia's east coast has brought both relief and pain after months of devastating bushfires and years of drought. The rain extinguished some of the worst bushfires which had burned for months. The downpour represented the biggest sustained run of rainfall in Sydney and surrounding areas for 30 years. It doused some bushfires and replenished depleted dams across the state of New South Wales. Some rural areas received more rain in recent days than it had never, ever experienced in the past. Bushfire warning signs were almost swamped by floods in several areas as the weekend rainfall cut power to tens of thousands of homes. And 26 persons were killed and 57 wounded in Thailand's mall shootings. Officials have described this as the country's worst mass shooting. Officials said the soldier with a grudge went haywire over a financial dispute and killed 2 persons on a military base before moving out on a far bloodier rampage as he drove to the mall where shoppers fled in terror. Authorities have identified the soldier as Sergeant Major Kaprachand Thomas. The first person killed is said to be the commanding officer of the 22 Ammunition Battalion where the suspect had served. The man also posted updates to his Facebook page during the rampage. Police evacuated hundreds of shoppers from the mall in small batches where they searched for the gunman.
Up next, sport. FIFA to probe CAF's financial dealings. Please stay with us.
Welcome back. This is CNN News. Now to sport. Nigeria Basketball Federation says the support of President Muhammadu Buhari and the commitment of Minister of Sports Sunday Dare are responsible for the Tigers' Olympic qualification. The senior women's national team is back to the Olympics after 16 years of absence. NBFF President Mustakide says the ability of the federation to produce 2 teams for the same Olympics has never happened in the history of basketball in Nigeria. Football's world governing body FIFA says it is ready to investigate a host of financial transactions carried out by the Confederation of African Football. Recommendations of the task force came after FIFA Secretary General Fatma Samuru's tenure ended this month. Some of the findings centers around improving infrastructure, refereeing, and competitions on the continent. That is it in news this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and other breaking stories, visit our website, annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a pleasant evening.